Hey everyone, and welcome to Co-Roadmap for Rebuilding, our new series aimed at helping you recover and grow your business. I'm Jeanette Mulvey, the Content Director of Co by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Before we get started, and we're going to get started quickly, I just want to tell you a little bit about this series. We know that this is a tough time, and the coming months are going to be especially important to small businesses as they try to recover. That's why we created this series, and we will spend each episode discussing practical strategies and insights that will help your business on the path to recovery. So first of all, thank you so much for joining me today. So our first episode today, we are talking about starting a new business in this environment, which of course is really challenging and brave thing to do. And we will share tips to help you find your niche in the market. And we will also discuss strategies you can use to pitch your business idea to the people who can help you build and finance it. So as we go along, you can answer our poll questions, and you can also ask questions of the speakers by typing them in the box on the right-hand side of the screen. Before I introduce our guests, I want to thank our sponsors, ADP, FedEx, MetLife, Square, and Staples Connect. We really appreciate their partnership in this series. So today I'm going to start our discussion. It'll be in two parts. The first part of our conversation will be about the challenge entrepreneurs face when they're starting up a new business and finding their niche in the market and figuring out exactly who their audience is. So with that, I'd like to introduce my expert guest. It's Ramon Ray. He is the founder of smarthustle.com and kind of my friend now. So welcome, Ramon.
Hey, Jeanette, nice to be here. Great to serve with you, uplift, and add some excitement to the amazing audience that we're going to have here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. And we're also welcoming two small business owners who started businesses during the pandemic. We have Bryon, he co-founded a company called Pasta Packs with his brother, and they're based in Florida, and he'll tell us about that. And we have Ashley Haynes, who is the owner of Learning Leaf Childhood Development Center in Washington, D.C., who has the backdrop of the year. So welcome both Ashley and Greg. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi.
Good morning.
Hi. All right, Ramon, we're starting with you.
All right.
So you talk to people all day long who are thinking about starting businesses. They have great business ideas. What is the most common thing people ask you when they're getting ready to start a business?
Yeah, starting a business is tough, and I'm really excited and honored to serve with my fellow panelists here today as well. Thank you for having me here. But I think, listen, there's questions related to funding, questions related to marketing, questions related to time, questions related to balancing family and business, so many different things. And I think regarding especially the marketing part, Jeanette, which I think is one of the toughest things, I think, is that you have the challenge, Jeanette, of I'm marketing my business a certain way that I think it should be. But then I have my customers who are buying it a certain way they think it would be. So how do I blend and decide really who I'm serving? You have the pasta business, right? You have the children's daycare. These seem like maybe they would be for everyone, but really, are they for everyone? Or is it for a certain segment of people? So I'll pause there to give you some more time to have interaction. But when I first think of it, I think that's really important. Seth Godin says it quite a bit. What problem am I solving and who am I serving? That's one of the fundamental keys as we're looking to grow our business.
Right. So really be thinking about who is your customer and not necessarily who you want them to be. So tell me, what kind of questions do people not ask you that they should be thinking about?
Yeah, I think one good question to ask is, and again, I bet the ballers here know, ballers, my fellow business owners here know, I see these amazing smiles, is to ask the questions like, what is your biggest challenge, Jeanette? That's one thing there. That's what you all do at Co. What's the problem you're having? I think then two, what can I do to solve that problem? And I think another thing, Jeanette, is the aspect of pricing. That trips people up. Pricing to me can be a powerful tool and a differentiator in the market. Let's take something simple like a pair of scissors. These scissors can be 99-cent scissors, but Jeanette, it's okay to have scissors that cost $49. It all depends on who I'm trying to sell to, what they see the worth, what I've conveyed to that. That's how you can navigate pricing. Because one thing that we're doing as entrepreneurs, we do want to make a fat profit. We do want to have great revenue so that we can serve others. And I think that's what people should never forget as they're looking to grow and start their businesses.
So I was going to ask you next, like, what are the three things that people should consider when defining their audience? So I think you already said pricing for one, for sure. What are the kind of two other things you have to think about when you're defining who your audience is?
Absolutely. I think this is something to really consider is that, do you want to have high volume and low price? That's one, but it's hard to compete against the bigger brands of the world. I won't mention names, but the bigger brands of the world. Two, or do you want to go really for maybe lower volume, but a premium price, which will get you a higher profit? And I think the other thing to consider is that what team are you building to help you execute on that? That's really, really important, Jeanette, to consider. What's that team will help you do that?
Yeah. So people who are starting a business should be talking to their potential customers before they do. So what kinds of questions, once you know who your target customer is and you start talking to them, what kinds of questions should you be asking them, and what should you do with their answers?
Sure. I think that's great. And I think when I think of the founder of, what is it, Stitch Fix, I think is the name, or Fix Stitch, the curated.
Stitch Fix, yep.
Thank you very much. I've heard her story and many others like that. Just been reading, Guy Raz's How I Did It. But I think a few questions to ask. Do you like it? Would you buy it again? Will you tell others about it? And most importantly, what didn't you like? As our mutual friend Jay Bear, right? Hug your haters. As he says, people who kind of don't like it, they complain. One or two of them may be people you want to run away from, but most people complain, Jeanette. They just want to be heard. In fact, they're trying to help you build your business. So I think when I hear critique from me before, I'm like, nah, why are you telling me you don't like how I cut my hair? Metaphorically, let me slow down and consider. Maybe Jeanette's telling me something that I should listen to. So those are a few things I should ask. And I think, Jeanette, you shouldn't run from the critique. You shouldn't run from the criticism, but especially when you're starting out, that helps you build it. I talked to the CEO of TripAdvisor many, many years ago, before he sold his company to Concur. And he was saying that's one of the number one things that's helped them iterate is the aspect of listening to customers. And last thing I'll say, even on Clubhouse, I was on a call on a room with some of the founders of Clubhouse. They're going through that process, Jeanette, right now, listening, prioritizing, iterating, and making the product better.
Yeah. So you can't make it about your ego, right? You can't take it as a personal insult.
Exactly.
Thanks, Ramon. I'll come back to you in a little bit. So Ashley, welcome. Tell us about your business.
Sure.
And you opened in the pandemic. So tell us, why did you choose to open during a pandemic, and tell us what your business does.
So I'm currently here. I opened a child care center, a child development center, and our students range from 6 weeks to pre-K. And I opened in the middle of a pandemic because I was scheduled to open in March. And where I am in Washington, D.C., all child care centers were shut down in March. And I opened in January because that's when we were allowed to open, to start. So it wasn't by choice, but here we are.
Before I go to Greg, just tell us a little bit about who are your customers and how are you, to Ramon's point, how are you differentiating yourself from other childcare centers?
So I like to think of my customers by our generation. Most of the parents are older millennials, and they are the parents to infants up to 4 years old. And when I think about, and I'm a millennial myself, I wanted to keep in mind the values and aesthetics that are important to older millennial parents and people. And so we tend to like things that are aesthetically pleasing, things that are memorable. Children and families are really important to everyone, but research has shown that there's a strong emphasis on family and on children with older millennials. And so I thought it was important to create a center that was magical for the children, but also an experience for the parents.
Great. Thank you so much. I'll come back to you in a couple of minutes. So Greg, welcome. So totally different kind of business. Your business is called Pasta Packs. You started it with your brother during the pandemic. And unlike Ashley, who had already planned to open her business, this was sort of inspired by the pandemic. So tell us a little bit about that and who your customer is.
Yeah, so Pasta Packs is a meal kit service that, like you said, my brother and I started in the middle of the pandemic. We saw an opportunity. Unfortunately, my brother lost his job. He was the sous chef at a local restaurant here in Tampa. And during the very first week of the shutdown here, we kind of were cooking constantly at our house, and we just decided to jump straight in. You know, we saw an opportunity for people to have an elevated cooking experience that was very simple and quick. So we just drove straight in. Yeah.
And who would you say, I was on your site and your pasta looks delicious, but it's not cheap. It's not dry pasta in a box. So
No.
I think like Ramon's example of the scissors was a great example. Tell us a little bit about your customer and how you're differentiating yourself.
Yeah, so I mean, our customer, we wanted to place or position ourselves for someone that has like a really good taste in like food, is really into the experience of cooking, and just position ourselves with a higher net worth kind of or income client.
Got it. Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ashley, we talked to Ramon about what kinds of things business owners should be asking of their customers. What he said, what resonated with you, and what have you found the most challenging in terms of trying to define who your audience, your customer base is?
So I really like Ramon's point about pricing. In childcare, you are placing your most valuable asset in a place where you don't know everyone. They're not family. And so you want to make sure that as a parent, you're placing your child in an extremely high quality center. So my job with pricing is to make sure that I'm not overpricing myself out of the market, but I also can't charge too cheap of a price, because then red flags go up to parents and they're saying, well, I want my child in the best program, and this is suspiciously low. And so there's a delicate balance to pricing and ensuring that your customer doesn't feel ripped off, but also wants to feel as if they are getting something high quality.
Right. Great. That's a really good point. Thank you. Greg, same question for you. Of what Ramon said, what really stood out for you, and what have been your biggest challenges in figuring out who your audience is?
I think the biggest thing is building that team. You know, for me, I know that I'm not the chef. My brother's a chef, so I take up more of the business role. And knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at, for us, it's been immensely empowering and important to put people in the position to keep that strong team, so everyone can sort of stay in their lane and keep on going. Some of our biggest challenges have just been dealing with the pandemic like itself, trying to figure out like how to get someone a quality product in a timely fashion and just continue that consistency.
Got it. Thanks. Ramon, coming back to you. So if you've defined your audience, you've launched your business, everything's going well, that's really not the end of the story, right? That's the beginning of the story. So how do you recommend business owners then keep the relationship going? Like, what's next after you've gotten the customer? What happens next?
Absolutely. And there's so many ways this can go, and I'll share with you briefly. I wish we had 10 hours together, Jeanette, but do we have 10 hours together, by the way?
We do not.
I wish we had, but no, seriously, a few journeys I've gone through, Jeanette, where one is being a better leader. I think that's one important. I want to just mention that, being a better leader to inspire our teams. Two, the aspect of financing is so important to keep our fingers on the numbers. But one thing I will mention is the aspect of what's next could be. Jim Collins talked about this, the flywheel. I have it in one of my books in my bookshelf there, which is really for the business understanding, and my fellow panelists here, whether it's pasta or childcare, what are those simple things that we have in business that make it work? And especially regarding the marketing, that we know our customers buy because of this. We can get attention in the marketplace because of this. We can serve them because of this. They buy then, and then not forgetting, can they refer customers to us? Will they buy again? And I think, Jeanette, once you get that, especially as we talk about marketing, you have a beautiful wheel that's going. Things are not going to be perfect, of course, but your business can start spinning with some predictability. And I think that's where business gets really good. Other challenges are going to come, but once you can get your business to some measure of predictability is where things get Smooth is the wrong word, but the only English word I know to use that.
Got it. I'm going to come back to you, Ramon, for the Q&A. Thank you. Ashley, what about you? Once you've got parents signed up and kids coming to your childcare center regularly, what are your mechanisms for building that relationship with parents in an ongoing way?
So it's really important for us to stay in constant contact with the parents. Most of them are first-time parents, and so letting go of their child is a big deal to them, and it hurts. And so we try to make them feel as a part of the day as we can. And so we use a platform that I absolutely love called Hi Mama, and it's a software program that allows teachers and parents to connect throughout the day. They get pictures, emails, newsletters. We probably send about 6 or 7 pictures throughout the day of their child. We're in constant communication after school, so they get emails updating them about what's happening the next day. It's important for us, and it's too bad the pandemic is happening at the moment, but the parents try to connect with each other also so that we can all feel like family.
Got it. Thank you. Now, Greg, yours is a totally different business, very different way of keeping in touch, but how do you keep in touch with your customers? I mean, they could buy the pasta once and never buy it again. So how do you make sure that you keep bringing people back?
I mean, we kind of go through like some of your traditional like email marketing kind of tactics. We produce like a lot of content because it is food. You can't smell it or touch it or taste it online. So we make sure that that content is it's good. It looks really good. It's clean. It's concise. And we ask so many questions, right? The feedback is important about the taste of the pasta, the texture of the pasta. How did the package, how did you receive the packaging? What did the customers think of the branding? Like that, all of that feedback, it guides us to our next idea and our next dish, right? We're in a sort of in a creative field, right? We're in a creative world, and we don't want to get lost in that and kind of like, like someone said earlier, kind of produce something that we think is what the customer wants. We want that feedback to guide us.
Right. Thank you. All right, I'm going to come back to you guys in a second. We're going to do an audience Q&A, but first we're going to do our first poll because I think it's fun to find out who our audience is and what they're thinking. So audience on the right side of your screen, let us know in 1 or 2 words how you would describe your business's audience, and we will watch those answers come in live right now. So small business, that's interesting. So we have a lot of B2B companies, I guess. Family, female, business owners, sophisticated. I want to be that person's customer that they think I'm sophisticated. Anxious, that's interesting. Very interesting. A lot of B2B businesses. So that's something for us to keep in mind as we answer these audience Q&As. So let's see. I'm going to take some questions from the audience, and I will let you guys know who I'm going to ask them of. Ramon, I'll just start with you.
This must be the easiest question. It must be the easiest question. That's why. And I'm just teasing you, Jeanette. Go ahead.
It is. You might not be able to answer it. I don't know. But you seem like you read a lot of books, so maybe you can. This person is just wondering, do you have any sense of the sectors that are seeing the most startup growth, the most new businesses?
I think there's a lot of sectors that have a lot of growth, and I think it all depends on where you're looking. So it depends on why they're asking. As an investor, I think they want to go deep and get some due diligence and research. But from what I'm seeing, I think definitely the healthcare, I think that's for sure growing. For sure, the aspect of climate and keeping our earth green, that's growing hugely. One, because that's the administration focus. So we're going to see a lot going there. And I think, imagine, I don't know the numbers, Jeanette, but imagine all the thousands of people that have been laid off and fired from their job. They're hunting. They're like, you know what? I've been doing this for years on the side. Is it time for me to do this either A, out of necessity, or because I just want to try to do it? So I hope that helps answer that question.
Yeah, thank you. Greg, I'm going to give you this one because it's about starting a food-related business. This person says, I want to start a green tea business. How can I define a target audience and begin selling products to that audience? So this could apply to really any kind of food-based business? Do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, I have the way that we did it, the way that we defined our audience is, it was like-minded individuals. We kind of, that first week, I think we probably made like 20 or 30 of these pasta packs, and we literally just gave it straight to the person or our clientele that we wanted, right? We gave it to them. We asked them tons of feedback, asked them tons of questions, and that honestly is what seated us in the market that we wanted to be in.
Thank you. Ashley, I'm going to combine two questions for you. What are the best and I feel like you've done a lot of research on your target audience. So what are the best and most reliable sources for market research? And the second part of the question, how did you get your first customers?
I would say that the best resource for me was censusbureau.com, where you can go on to certain, you can research certain zip codes. You can get very granular in terms of age and income and neighborhood. That was really important to me. It was important to me to research other childcare centers in the neighborhood where I ended up finding a space. I call it the Bill Belichick spying method, but it's important to know what other what the competition is doing and also who you're serving in terms of demographics. So Census Bureau and also social media helps a lot in terms of looking for ideas and seeing the general kind of ethos of your customer base around your area. So
Great.
Instagram, Census Bureau.
Great, thank you. Greg, how about you? How did you get your first customers?
Our first customers, like I said earlier, were friends and family, like within, just like Ashley's saying, kind of within like a targeted area, because we also offer like delivery. So we wanted to deliver and target like in specific areas like here in Tampa. So once we were able to kind of proof of concept and get this pasta out and get the right feedback, the return at the beginning of the pandemic, the return customer, that rate was so high that we knew that, it was properly seeded, man.
Great. Ramon, coming back your way. This person says, do you have thoughts or suggestions around collaborating with other businesses to grow your exposure? I feel like this is right up your alley.
Yeah, it is so important. A great question. I just did a biz dev call on Clubhouse with that. So the answer is yes, it's so important. And a few things on collaboration and partnerships. I think one, always have a what's in it for you mentality, not just me, but what's in it for the other person. I think point two, then ask, how can I benefit? I think three, if you're both mutually succeeding, things will work. Four, it's good. I think Greg kind of mentioned, it's nice start, he implied, to work with people you like, people you trust, because if you start from there, Marcus Lemonis talks about this quite a bit, right? Of the profit. So if you start with people you know, like, and trust, you can grow from there. But it's a very good way. You don't have to spend a ton of money on your business if you can build your business through partnerships.
Great. I'm going to stay with you for a second because I like this question. I want to ask it of all three of you, like a lightning round sort of thing. So Ramon, I'll start with you. What's the most important key to a business differentiating itself from the competition?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is not to focus so much on the competition about what they're doing wrong, but what you can do right. I think that's one, and realizing we all of our companies, all of us have a secret sauce. So it's finding that there's a lot of daycare companies, a lot of pasta companies. There's only one special business owner who are doing it. So that's what I think it is, finding out what you do best, better than everybody else, and that your customers notice and appreciate. That's important as well.
Great. Ashley, what about you? What do you think is the number one key to differentiating yourself?
I thought it was concentrating on making the experience immersive for both children and families, something that would leave them inspired. I don't think you should pay too much close attention to competition, but I did notice a trend in the competition where a lot of the daycares look exactly the same, and I wanted to push boundaries, imagination, and do something completely different based on what I loved and what I thought other people would love as well.
Thank you. And Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, I think for us, it was kind of doing the research here in Tampa and like realizing that there was no particular company like ours here. I mean, you had obviously restaurants and other hospitality doing Uber Eats and things of that nature, but nothing really tailored to this meal kit service on a local level here in Tampa. So I think just for us, that a bit of exclusivity was really, really important in that decision for us.
Thanks. You guys hang out there because I'll be back to you when we switch to our next panel discussion. But Ramon, I'm bringing you back one more time for one last question.
All right.
This person says, I am at the top of my class in my arena, but I am not a very good sales closer. I feel like I can relate to this person. Do you recommend outsourcing the cold contacting of customers?
What a powerful question. I love it. So here's a few things on sales. To answer that question specifically, cold contacting of customers can work. So I think it's something that you should try, especially if they're highly targeted too. The word cold, remember, is contextual because many times we think cold customers have to be cold, but we can warm up customers through email newsletters, through webinars and things like that. And 3, thank you for asking the question. I definitely recommend just get some sales training. That may help you 10, 20, 30, 40, 50%. You may not be perfect at it, but a little bit of training and guidance, I bet you'll be better than where you are today. Jeanette, it's been great being with you.
Thank you, Ramon. So I'm going to say goodbye to you. Thank you so much. And we are going to shift gears right now, and we're going to talk about another really important element of starting a new business, which is pitching your business. So everyone has to pitch their idea, especially when it's time to raise money, whether it's with an investor, with a bank, with your customers, or even if you're just pitching your friends and family on helping you raise the money. So that's really important. And I find often a thing that people don't spend that much time on, and people tend to struggle with explaining what their business does succinctly and clearly. So that's what we're going to talk about now. And to do that, we're going to introduce and welcome our next guest, Charlie O'Donnell, who is the founder of Brooklyn Bridge Ventures in Brooklyn, New York. And hi, Charlie.
Hi there. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. As a venture capitalist, I am sure you hear pitches all day long. And we're hoping you will share some of your secrets with us on how to make a successful pitch and what not to do. And Greg and Ashley are going to stick around, and we're going to talk to them shortly. So, Charlie, Hi.
Hi. I think that one key that, you mentioned hearing pitches is actually that the first pitch usually comes over email, right? So you're trying to get to the point where you can pitch somebody in person, and there's that first step. So just to give you a little sense of the numbers, I probably get about 2,000 requests for my time a year. Now that can come over email, Twitter DM, LinkedIn, and I take about 150 to 200 first-time pitch meetings a year. So there's a really kind of big cutoff in between just emailing for my time and actually getting it. So I think that's a part of the pitch that people often forget about.
Yeah. So when you're looking at those and you're deciding which ones to actually meet with, what are you actually looking for? I looked at your website, so I read a lot about you giving advice to people on how to pitch you. So just tell them like a few things. What are you specifically looking for that will make you either say, yes, I'm going to schedule a meeting, or like, I know this isn't going to be for me? Sure.
So first things first is clarity, right? Like, I think people put a lot of pressure on themselves to try and impress, and they do that in a way that uses a lot of big fancy words, and sometimes their business is just fairly straightforward, right? It's not particularly complicated. It's a matter of execution or brand or what have you. If I don't understand what it is that you're doing, I'm just not going to take that meeting, right? There's just too many other really smart, really hardworking founders for me to be out there meeting with. And so I'm not going to, dive down the rabbit hole to work this out before we've even gotten to that point. So just be sort of upfront and direct. Here's what I'm doing. Don't try and dress it up. That's probably the most important thing. I think the second thing is there's a really big difference between a good idea and something that's a good business or even a great business and something that is appropriate for venture capital. I'm looking for businesses that have the kind of growth trajectory that can be $100 million revenue businesses one day, but also the kind of businesses where the founder is throwing enough risk taking on top of it where there might be a chance of a zero. And some founders who are just not comfortable with that, taking that swing for the fences where that's not the sort of trajectory they're looking for their business, it's just not a right fit for me. It could be a perfectly great business that throws off cash flow and generates income and even perhaps one that gets acquired. But if you're not going to put the sort of pedal to the metal in terms of searching for that growth, then it's maybe not an appropriate business for venture. So that's two. And I think the last thing I'll say is too many people talk about what they've done in the past, and they think about fundraising as a reward for what you've accomplished. And it's great that you opened up a second line of business or broke even or won some award, or all of those are sort of good ways to sort of back up your pitch. But I'm buying a share in the future. So I probably want 70, 80% of the pitch to be about where you're taking this thing and where your goals are versus something that's more backwards looking.
So that's really interesting and a lot of good information. And I think a fine distinction I think that you're making, which is just because the pitch isn't right for you or for any venture capitalist doesn't mean it's not a good business idea. It just means that it's not the kind of investment you're looking for.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about what you're looking for in terms of the business itself, but tell me a little bit more about the entrepreneur themselves and what are 3 personality traits you look for in the person, if you even do care about the person's personality, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a lot of times where you go to these panels and somebody says, well, we're looking for great entrepreneurs. I don't know if that means that any entrepreneur who failed in hindsight turns out not to be great. I mean, I know a lot of great people whose businesses have failed, and it's not that they weren't smart and it's not that they weren't working hard. So I'm a little suspect that there's sort of one standard format for great entrepreneur. It's also relative to what kind of business, right? I can think of 2 successful businesses in my portfolio where if I switched the entrepreneurs, they wouldn't be great at their job, right? One company demands of one particular founder a great sales leadership, and the other company demands sort of a design insight, right? They wouldn't be able to run each other's businesses. So I think that's key. I just think fast learners is probably one of the best traits. Somebody who accepts when they don't know some things and is really clever about how to find an answer and how to seek out the things that they haven't learned yet.
Let me ask you this. Would you invest in a business if you didn't personally like the founder?
No. It's funny because I've been on panels where that question has been asked, and I feel like everybody in the room sort of knew what founder we might have been talking about. It's really hard, particularly from a recruiting standpoint, right? It's not all about the founder. Any company that gets up to $100 million in revenue is going to have, 100, 150, 200 plus people working at it. So much of the job is being able to hire. And if you can't sit there across the table from somebody and say, I think the best people would like to work with this person and would enjoy working with this person, I don't know how that company's going to get there. I mean, we hear these stories of sort of notoriously difficult or demanding founders, and sure, that happens. And I think a lot of times it's sort of by exception, but I think a lot of those companies really have trouble scaling, on the talent side. And it's so important that people want to work with the founder. That doesn't mean you need to be best friends with them. That doesn't mean you need to like the same stuff or both be into sports or anything else like that. But there has to be sort of mutual respect and, good communication and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And I didn't have anyone particular in mind. Just thank you so much, Charlie. I'm going to come back to you in a couple of minutes with another question. Ashley, I'm coming to you though. So Ashley, you have, just for anyone who joined us late, Ashley started a child care center in Washington, D.C. in the pandemic. And I think, Ashley, you did raise some funding. So can you just tell us a little bit about that? How long did it take you? Did you get a lot of no's? And just what advice do you have for people who are pitching their business?
So I went about raising capital through family and also going to banks. And so I went to large and small banks and was told no 3 times before I was told yes. And I would say the process took maybe about a month of that. And then I secured an SBA real estate 7A loan. And so with that came the purchase of this center here. And that loan is great for minorities and women. And there were also grants available in DC for childcare centers because there is such a dire need and not enough centers to go around, and it's an important business. And so there are numerous ways to find funding, banking, grants, friends and family.
Thank you. Greg, you did not raise funding. You are bootstrapping it right now. So tell us, are you thinking eventually you will? And if so, what are you doing right now to prepare for the possibility of having to pitch your business to investors?
Yeah, so I think for us with Pasta Packs, our first kind of points in growth, like we're still in a position to be able to bootstrap that, build out a larger facility to kind of support the volume and the growth that we want to get to. And I think our third phase of growth is when we will start to kind of approach lending. And I think once we get to that point, I want to kind of lean on friends and family and go more so of the private route so that we can, I think building a team and building partnerships are really, really important. And I feel like I'm lucky to be surrounded by some really, really skilled and really, really talented entrepreneurs, like people who are very seasoned in hospitality. So for us, that's the route that we will go.
Great, thank you. Charlie, coming back to you, if I want to talk specifically about pitches, in like one sentence, what is your best piece of advice for somebody when they're crafting their pitch? Like, should it be short? Like, give us a little advice.
I think the goal of a good pitch is just to get to that next meeting, not convince them to invest off of one sentence. I think a lot of times people try and do too much.
Okay, that's actually advice I wouldn't have thought of, so that's really good. Thank you. What about you, Ashley? What have you learned as you've refined your pitch, that what works and what does not?
Data around the neighborhood, data around the shortage of childcare centers was really important. Data about the high income net worth of parents in the neighborhood where I was looking to purchase a property. Those were all extremely important points to make to the bank, being really concise and to the point. And they loved my vision boards, my Pinterest boards for the look of the center. So all of that went into the meetings. And also knowing numbers, knowing what your tuition's going to be, proving based off of the competition that you can fill up quickly and you can reach a certain threshold in terms of revenue every year. I had to prove all of that, and so far we're on track for even during the pandemic. not as quickly, but soon. So that was all really important.
Thank you. Greg, I know that you have not pitched investors on this particular business, though I'm sure you've pitched many other people on the business. And I know that in previous businesses, you have raised funds. So just tell us a little bit about your pitch approach. What has worked for you?
I mean, I think for currently for Pasta Packs, it's just the story, you know, our story in comparison with the numbers, and just like Ashley said, just hard data has been in our favor. I think, you know, we've been on a pretty big media sort of a tour, and which is a very, very different experience to be like in the Wall Street Journal, on CNBC, and a bunch of other media outlets. Like, it's brought a lot of investors to us, which is kind of a different, it gives me a different perspective on how we need to pitch. It's making me kind of pay much more attention again to who do I want to partner with, and how is that actually going to get us to the goals and the point where we want to be.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think when people talk about pitching their business, they're so focused on getting someone to say yes that you don't often spend time on thinking, is this the right person for me?
Exactly.
So I think that's a really good point. Charlie, I want to ask you, I feel like your world is so interesting to people and a little bit mysterious. So I want to ask you a couple more questions. By people, I meant me, by the way. Greg just talked about the story, and it made me wonder, as an investor, how much do you care about people's, you know, origin story or the backstory, or do you care?
So yes, I do. And one thing I'll add just about pitches before I answer that is, I think you really have to think hard about what the specific other person across the table is looking for. So for example, like if Ashley's pitching a banker, right, who's giving her a loan, that person doesn't really share in the upside of the business. They're just looking to get paid, right? So her pitch is going to be more about, hey, like, even if we don't hit our targets, we can still, you know, pay off this loan, you'll get paid back, and all of that sort of stuff. A venture capitalist like me is trying to figure out how Ashley can open up 30 centers just like that all across the country, right? I don't mind so much if there's some chance that, you know, they might not be able to make as much money as they're hoping for. So like the same pitch isn't always right for the same audience.
So know your audience.
Yeah, you really, really need to know your audience for sure. In terms of the story, I do care, especially as a generalist investor. You could be the absolute expert in your subject area, and you know more than me about it, right? And so what am I trying to do? I'm not trying to outdo your research. I'm trying to figure out if I can trust your experience, right? So the other day I got pitched by somebody who is doing a business whose main client is federally qualified health clinics, which is a government program to address healthcare deserts. The idea that lots of people are covered by Medicaid but aren't in the same geographic area as a provider who will accept it, right? I've been very fortunate. Both my parents worked for New York City. We had good healthcare. Like, I wasn't familiar with that system. So the founder's story of not only growing up, dealing with a lack of insurance and going to free clinics, and also working in other healthcare companies, gave me a lot of the confidence to say, oh, okay, like, I can trust all of the things that this person is telling me without redoing their research, so to speak, because I'm a solo general partner. Like, I don't have a whole team to go put out a 100-page research report on everything the founder is telling me. So for me, story is part of due diligence. Like, how did you know this opportunity existed? And how can I trust that, like, no one else is quite servicing the customer in this way?
That's great. I'm glad I asked you that question because I think it's important for people to know that. So I am going to do an audience Q&A with all three of you in a moment. But before we do, because I think it's good for us to know our audience, we're going to do one more poll. So audience, you can answer that on the right side of your screen. Where have you pitched your idea most often? And we have family and friends, I'm still planning, potential investors and banks and lenders. So not surprisingly, family and friends is the most popular. And I see that a big part of our audience is still planning, which I think is good for us to know, because I feel like the advice that we're sharing today is really good for someone who's just starting out and going to plan to pitch for the first time. Okay, so we're going to switch to the Q&A. And I'm probably going to come to you first, Charlie. So hang on one second. Okay, Charlie, what is the most important statistic or number a person can bring to a pitch?
Oh man, I think it's really up to them to tell me. Half the time I feel like I'm just sitting there learning. So I don't necessarily think, especially at the stage that I'm looking at. I've funded PowerPoints. I've done deals sort of pre-product, pre-revenue. So, sometimes there are no numbers necessarily going into that. And I'm just kind of looking for what is the goal for the next round? How big could this get? How much money is it going to take to get there? Rather than if you hit 25K a month in revenue, thumbs up, I'm investing. It doesn't really work like that.
And this, a follow-up question that I'm going to also ask of you, Ashley and Greg. This person's asking I think what they're asking is how far out should you project your growth?
For me, it was at least 3 years. 3 years, 3 to 5 years. I think that's an important trajectory.
Go ahead, Greg. How about you? How far out did you guys plan?
Yeah, so we're planned out 2 to 5 years right now. I think, I'm based here in Tampa, and the development growth here in Tampa is off the charts. So that 3 to 5 years for us is extremely important.
So I'm going to ask Greg a question.
Yeah.
How accurate do you think that year 5 prediction is?
Not at all.
Right.
Not at all.
And I think that's super key, is that the willingness to do it is a good exercise,
Exactly.
right? It answers a lot of questions. It helps you sort of think about the idea of your business existing 5 to 7 years from now, I think is important, even though you're just oh my God, I can't pay the bills for next quarter. How do I even pretend? But keep in mind that a pitch is not a promise. Exactly. The expectation is not that you will get this right. It's the exercise of the potential. As a VC, I want to know what's possible. I am not expecting you to promise me this outcome. And a lot of people really struggle. They sandbag their pitches because they're that's crazy to imagine that this would be $100 million business in 7 years. And then I flip it around to them. I was like, well, is it possible? And they said, well, anything's possible. I said, yeah, that's great, because I run a portfolio of 30 companies. I don't need all of you to work out. I need 4 or 5 of you to work out big time, and then I'm okay.
On that topic, Charlie, this person wants to know, when you make an investment, how quickly are you looking to have an exit? What is your timing like?
Oh man, 2 weeks later for 30x, that, I'm not, the faster the better. Why wait around? No, in all seriousness, building a real company takes time. I was very lucky at the start of my career. One of the earliest investments I made was in a company called GroupMe, which is still, sort of a top 50 app on the App Store. People seem to use it a lot during fantasy football season with their little groups. And that company sold within a year for $70 million. That's not normal. That doesn't usually happen. The first sort of big exit from my Brooklyn Bridge Ventures portfolio is sort of on the verge of happening, and that's a deal I did 7 years ago. So it takes time. It's really a longer term investment.
Yeah. This is, I think, an important question. How long should, Charlie, I'm asking this of you, how long should a first pitch email be?
just as whatever the minimum amount of time is for me to, get the gist of what you're doing. And here's the other thing too, like, you don't have to tell me everything. Look, I've seen a lot of deals. I know about a lot of spaces. I know enough to be dangerous about a lot of different spaces. So it's not going to be long before I kind of get what you're doing. The thing I would sort of caution against is things like attached videos and things where you're sort of assuming I've got 5 minutes for this email. And I think that if I can't sort of quickly scan and say, well, I could kind of see myself doing something like that or not, then that's going to be tough for somebody to go through. So that's why one of the reasons, by the way, I'm a big fan of using DocSend to send over decks if you have them. Like, I know, for example, that the deck for my fund, which is actually a fairly decently long deck, takes interested people exactly 3 minutes to go to, plus or minus 3 seconds, basically. It's a 3-minute deck. And so being conscious of where people spend time and how long it takes people to go through them, what slides they spend time on and skip over, I think that's pretty useful. I think you probably want to keep it to sort of 1 to 2 minutes to go through on a deck.
I am editorializing now, but I have been on a few panels of reviewing or judging business plans, and I so frequently find myself reading the person's pitch and truly having no idea what they do, and then going to their website and trying to figure out what they do. So and still not knowing. So I guess there's a question here just that says, like, basically our company's very complicated and we're often confused with a different kind of company. So how do I communicate that quickly? And I'm not really sure you have an answer to that question, but it really needs to be figured out. So do you have any advice on that topic of just how to really simplify things?
Yeah, sure. You provide a product or service that people pay for. That's your company. Like, how many of those people are there? How much are they willing to pay? Like, yes, the day-to-day of how you execute that, I'm sure, is enormously complicated. And it's the reason why, you don't need to worry about sharing the idea with somebody like an investor, because I could never do what it is that you're doing. It's, your history, your expertise, and all of that sort of stuff really is the differentiator there. But from a basic sense, like, if you can't in a minute describe the basics of what you're doing, just think about this from a consumer point of view. I show up on your website as your target customer, whether I'm a consumer or a business. How much time do you think I'm going to click around the site before I click off and decide whether or not I want to put my email address in or click the buy button or the trial button? So, for most times you only have one screen above the fold to convince your customer whether or not to trial this thing or to put in their email. So there's no reason why your initial pitch to an investor should be that much more complicated.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to you at the end for one more question. I'm going to come to you, Greg, and then Ashley, I'm going to ask you the same question. Let's just turn things around. If you're shopping for an investor, if you have the luxury of having more than one option, Greg, what defines the right investor for you?
I think currently, the right investor for us is, I don't know.
I'm going to come back to you, Ashley. What would be what's the quality in the right investor for you?
I thought a lot about this before I started this. I'm not sure I want any investors. I want to keep my autonomy, and I have a very strong vision and a lot of faith in what I'm doing. And as this center grows, I don't know that I want that partnership with anyone or input, to be honest. But if I were to partner with someone, it would be someone who trusted me and the vision and allowed me to grow without too much not
interference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interference is a great word.
Yeah.
Can I make a pitch to them?
Yeah, and actually this is going to be, we're just about to wrap up. You make your pitch.
Okay, so if I were pitching them on me, what I would say to the point that you just brought up, Ashley, is that, look, at the end of the day, this is your business, and you are the CEO. You are running it. You are there the day to day. What I offer as an investor, I think I'm a big believer that companies that scale create processes that are bigger than any individual one person. They create a structure of accountability for everybody within the company. And I've seen that happen across a lot of companies. And I think you have to take each thing individually, right? An investment doesn't necessarily mean a loss of control. Taking on a board member doesn't mean board control. Taking one investment doesn't mean you're going to keep going back to that well for investment over and over and over again. I have a company that I invested in 3 years ago that is 10x in revenue, and they haven't barely even touched the seed round, and they have not gone for a Series A. And I'm thrilled to be an investor in that company. But I can often bring the perspective of sometimes asking the nudging question or the dumb question, and which maybe isn't so dumb and takes us down a little bit of a rabbit hole where good things can come out of.
Thank you, Charlie. That is it. That is all we have time for today. So I want to thank all three of you. I really appreciate your time and your stories, and I know that our audience does too. So Charlie, Greg, and Ashley, thank you very much for being on our first episode of Roadmap for Rebuilding. I want to thank our sponsors, ADP, FedEx, MetLife, Square, and Staples Connect, for bringing the program to you today. Please join us for our next series event, which is next week on Thursday, February 18th at noon Eastern. We will be diving deeper into the topic of startups and talking particularly about how to build your brand from scratch. In the meantime, check out Co, the website that I am the editor of, for resources that we've specially curated for you. And the link is located at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be sending that to you in your inbox. Thank you so much. Together we will recover and rebuild, and we will see you next week. Thanks, everyone.